Welcome everyone to this Ready, Set Up, and Go session. The idea behind the session is that we are going to set up PagerDuty in 20 minutes. So we know that time is valuable. We know that we're all working in these very fast-paced environments, and we want to show you that it is not difficult to implement this tool, to implement PagerDuty into your lives. So with that, my name is Camden Louie. I'm a senior technical trainer with the PagerDuty University team, and I'm going to walk you through a few different pieces of the PagerDuty platform. So I'm going to talk a little bit about things like setting up your user profile. Really essential foundational piece to understand how and when you're going to be notified about an actionable item in PagerDuty. I'm also going to talk about creating on-call schedules. What does it mean to create these rotations, and how do we know who's going to be on call at any point in time? That, of course, ties our users to escalation policies really nicely so that we know when and where are we going to be contacted, and when does it need to go to the next person? Who do we have as our backup? Those escalation policies are really valuable in that way. And lastly, I'm going to talk about configuring our services and integrations, making sure you understand that flow of information into the PagerDuty platform. So those are the four key components of setting up your PagerDuty platform, and that's kind of the process that you would usually go through in order to create your services. Now, what we're going to do today to better understand how they link together before you get started is to actually begin with those services themselves. So the reason that we wanted to start with services is because understanding technical and business services is really key to understanding the structure and flow of information through PagerDuty to our users. So we do have two different types of services in PagerDuty, technical and business. Technical services can be connected up to a larger overarching business service. That's what this visualization is supposed to help you understand. So you can think about your technical services as being those individual microservices, a particular area that your team owns that might roll up into a larger area of the business. That would be the business service. So the reason why we want to make sure we define our technical services clearly and intentionally is because that allows you to ensure that you can better triage incidents. You can triage them more quickly because you can ensure that the right person is getting the information that they need, the relevant information that they need in a timely fashion. And then we also have business services to give us overarching views, kind of, high level views of what's going on in an area, which is going to be very useful if we're thinking about our stakeholders, our customer support teams, dependent teams who just need to know what's going on in our area but don't need to know all the details. There is also this awesome feature within the platform that we don't get to talk about in depth today, but I did want to mention it. It's called the service graph. I would like to describe this as a living, breathing asset that you have available to you. It really allows us to show the relationship between technical and business services across the organization. So you can see that impact, that downstream impact as well when you have a problem that arises. So now I want to show you how you can actually set up that technical service in your PagerDuty account. So here we are in my demo account. I'm here on the landing page, which you usually see when you first log into PagerDuty, incident dashboard. So it shows us what activity is currently open on our account. What we're going to do first is to navigate to the services menu. Here, I'm going to select service directory from that dropdown. And I now have the ability to look at the technical services that have already been created on the account. I can search for a particular name. I can filter my view based on team, if that's appropriate, based on business service, as I mentioned earlier. So you could filter via business service, the time of the last incident, or just sort our services by name. Now, what I'm going to do right now, though, is create a new service. So I clicked on that button in the top right-hand corner, new service. Go ahead and give your service a clear name. So for example, I want to call this Warehouse Logistics, Mars. So this is for my warehouse on Mars that I want to help monitor. This is where I'm going to be gathering information about our warehouse to alert the right teams when there's a problem there. I could add a short description. This is the ice cream warehouse located on Mars. Add something descriptive. This is just to allow people to know at a glance what this service is supposed to be doing and who is using this. I click the next button and it takes us to the next step, which is to assign the incident. Who would be notified if an incident was triggered on this service? So in this case, you can select an existing escalation policy. So if you've already created your warehouse logistics Mars escalation policy, you could go ahead and search for that and add it right here. Or what many of us do when we're creating new services is we need to test them, we need to demo them. So in this case, I want to go ahead and generate a new escalation policy. It will automatically create for me, and then I'll be able to edit it later. But for now, I don't want to notify anybody except for myself. So PagerDuty will go ahead and create a new escalation policy with just me on it. Our third step here is about reducing the noise. This is where we have the option to do a few different things, like grouping alerts. So those events come into PagerDuty from your various tools. Then they get formalized, turned into what we call alerts in PagerDuty, where we have determined that they're actionable, something that's actually important. But not every single alert needs to trigger its own incident. So you have the ability to create grouping. Intelligent alert grouping is what you see here. This is going to be the recommendation, the default, because this is where PagerDuty is going to use machine learning, event intelligence to help determine what needs to happen, what needs to be put together based on the information in your event summary, based on your past actions. You also have the ability to group based on content. If there's a particular field, like maybe a ticketing field or a server name, you could group based on that particular field, or even based on time. So alerts that come in within a 5-minute period, a 3-minute period, you can see here I have a few different time options. Maybe within a 5-minute period, I want to go ahead and group all alerts that come in into this one service because I know that they're almost always related. Lastly, you could turn off alert grouping. That means it would just trigger an event or trigger an incident every time an alert was sent to this service. But I'm going to go ahead and choose intelligent alert grouping for this option. We also have transient alerts that are available now. You can go ahead and auto pause incident notifications if you know you have really noisy services, noisy tools that auto resolve themselves very often. You could choose to use this auto pause incident notifications. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for right now. That's something that you can explore in the future. I just wanted to briefly mention them. I hit that next button so that I can get to step number 4, which is my integrations. So this is probably what you are really interested in. How do we get information into PagerDuty? Well, here we can choose from over 650 partner integrations that we have. So say, for example, I know that my team uses Pingdom. I could go ahead and select Pingdom from the drop-down menu. I could type in the name of any other tools that I use. Let's say we use Zendesk. I could go ahead and select that. If I type in my Camden tool, I can't find that integration. PagerDuty doesn't have a partner integration with them. That's okay because I can create an integration using the Events API v2. That's one of our most popular integration types, as you can see from this label here. So I've selected that Events API v2. You might also have a tool that you maybe don't have access to the API for. And so what you could do is if it can send an email, it can send information to PagerDuty. So I selected that email integration as another option. So these are just a few of the different examples, some of the different tools that you might use, but you always have that Events API v2 available to you along with the email integration option. And then we're going to create the service. So now I have my warehouse logistics Mars technical service that has been created. We are monitoring the ice cream warehouse that's located on Mars. I have my integration. So I've landed here on the integrations tab where I have step-by-step instructions to help me set up this integration, including things like the integration key over here on the right-hand side. So I can use that to direct my information to this specific PagerDuty service. So we've really tried to lay out those steps for you. Just follow the instructions and you should be able to set up your integrations. You have including your integration email right here with that email integration guide. So we've tried to make those guides easily accessible. Once you've set up your integrations, you can also set up your settings. So settings, this first section of settings, assign and notify, is where we can see that escalation policy that we had assigned to this service, Warehouse Logistics Mars EP. I could edit that in the future. So after I've done my testing, I could go ahead and edit it and add the appropriate escalation policy. Or I can leave that and set up some of these other pieces, like how should my responders be notified? Do I want them to receive high urgency notifications every single time an incident is created on this service? Do I want them to receive low urgency notifications? You can see that we even write out, it does not escalate. Low urgency incidents are typically things that don't need your immediate attention, whereas high urgency incidents are critical. They need to get your attention immediately. So you can think about how we'll set up those notification rules in a little bit, and how that differs. You can also choose to use this dynamic notification type or support hours for your notification types. I'm going to go ahead and use dynamic notifications for right now as an example, and I'm going to save those changes. So there are a lot of different settings here within the service details page that you can set up. Service dependencies is also how you're going to populate that service graph that I mentioned earlier. So if my warehouse logistics Mars is dependent on another technical service or dependent on another business service, I could go ahead and show that indication here. If I use any particular services, or if I am used by, meaning the warehouse logistics Mars technical service is used by another service, I could create those connections right here within the service details page. Now, with that service, okay, great. I talked about the escalation policy though, because that's who is going to be contacted if a service, if an incident is triggered here on this service. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to the people menu here and select escalation policies. Let's go ahead and find that warehouse escalation policy. Warehouse Logistics Mars EP. So I just searched for it here in the search bar, and you can see immediately after the incident is triggered, notify Camden Louie. So it's going to notify me, and that's it. So it's just going to notify me, and that's the end of it. That's fine for when I'm testing things, but when we're actually creating our escalation policies for our teams, we're probably going to want to build slightly more robust escalation policies. So I'm going to hit this edit button to show you how we set up those escalation policies. So here we have the title, Warehouse Logistics Mars EP. That's a perfectly logical name for this particular team and this service, so I'll go ahead and keep that. I could add a little description if I wanted to. I could choose to associate it with a team if you have teams set up in your account. I'm going to actually go ahead and navigate down to these escalation rules though. So immediately after the incident is triggered, who do I want to contact? You can see here, if I click into this search bar here, I have the option to add any schedules or users that I would like to add to this escalation policy level. So right now, I am assigned, just one individual person is assigned to this level. I'm going to go ahead and delete my name, click on that X next to my name. I don't want to be contacted. We actually have a schedule that we could use in order to determine who's on rotation, so who is going to be on call for this particular team. So for example, let's see if I have I have my ice cream teams. Let's see if they pop up. There we go, my ice cream facilities teams. I have created 3 different schedules for them. So you'll see this pattern is very common. I have a primary schedule, a backup schedule, and a manager schedule. That is so I can create 3 different levels of my escalation policy. I'm going to go ahead and fill in my ice cream facilities team primary schedule right here in the first level. So now we are seeing that Andromeda is currently on call for this schedule. We'll talk about schedules in a moment, but Andromeda is currently on call for this schedule. She's going to have a certain amount of time, let's say 8 minutes, to acknowledge this incident before it escalates to the next person. And this next person is going to be added by using that new escalation policy rule. Let's go ahead and use ice cream facilities backup. So now we have our backup team member. So whoever's on call for that backup team would be contacted. Let's give them another 8 minutes. So you get to determine how much time each rule is going to get. Now, lastly, let's go ahead and choose that ice cream team manager schedule. So this is just a common flow. You could have multiple schedules. So if I wanted to have multiple schedules, I could add them to a particular level of the escalation policy. We recommend just one. So that's what I'm going to show you right now. I could also add individuals, as you saw earlier. And I'm going to give the manager 10 minutes to respond. If they don't acknowledge the incident, if nobody acknowledges the incident, I can repeat the escalation policy up to 9 times. So I've gone through that. I'm going to go back to the beginning and keep on going. That's just to give you a short and sweet example of what that looks like. Here is a description. All right, there we go. So I have my warehouse logistics, Mars EP. You can see that Andromeda is on call for the primary schedule. Then it goes to the backup, Draco, if she does not respond to that incident. And if Draco doesn't respond after 8 minutes, we go to Petunia. So you can see that here we've gone through our escalation policy. If nobody acknowledges the incident, we're going to repeat it 9 times. That's a really basic escalation policy, just to give you an example. Next, I wanted to show you how we set up a schedule. So I'm going to navigate to my schedules page from that people menu. And there are a lot of different types of schedules that you can create. And here we have what would look like much more complicated schedules. I'm going to start off with a new schedule though, and I just want to create a simpler schedule to start off with. So first and foremost though, you need to come up with a name. Luckily, we already have a pretty good, warehouse logistics team primary. That seems like a pretty good name. I could even add in that Mars tag to indicate that it's for the Mars team and not one of our other warehouses. I could add a short description about what this is. Let's say this is a weekly schedule. So really simple weekly rotation. Choose your appropriate time zone. I'm in San Francisco, so I've chosen Pacific time, and then you get to choose your users. So come in here, look at the drop-down menu. You can select the appropriate users. You can search for somebody's name and add them to the list. And I now have my 3 users that I want to be associated with this particular schedule. I can choose what kind of rotation I want. Let's just say a weekly rotation. The handoff time is going to be Monday at 9 a.m. And now when I look down here at my final schedule, I can see Andromeda's on call until next Monday at 9 a.m. Then it goes to George, and then it rotates to me. And so you can see it continues to rotate through as we scroll through the dates. Really simple schedule. So that might be like an example of a manager schedule, might be a little simpler like that. There are also going to be situations where you have slightly more complicated schedules. So if I added another layer to this schedule, maybe I have my weekly rotation, but then I have a weekend schedule as well. Let's go ahead and add a few of our users to that weekend schedule. And then I can go ahead and choose that rotation type. I want one person to be on call for the entire weekend. So weekly rotation makes sense. But the start of the rotation is actually going to be Friday at 5 p.m. So now if we look down here at my configuration layers, we can see that I have users that are just rotating through weekly, just like I did in that first layer. So that's not exactly what I want. I'm going to choose to restrict on-call shifts. That's the little checkbox that I just chose. And I'm going to say I want to restrict the on-call shift to be Friday, 5 p.m. to Monday at 9 a.m. Let me hit apply. And now we can see that layer 2 has these big white gaps during the week when the other user is going to be on call. But then over the weekend, we have our weekend on-call shift person. So that's just a quick example of how you might set up a schedule. Let's create that schedule. And now we can check that final schedule and see who is going to be on call. So if we ever see overlap in the configuration layers, just know that the bottom layer always takes precedence over the top layer. So key way of just, a short example to show you how you can set up those schedules. Now, for those of you who are team managers, just so that you know, there's this thing called overrides. So an individual user could switch shifts with somebody, create an override very easily by just coming into the schedule, clicking on the particular shift and creating, scheduling an override. They could choose the person who's going to cover for them. There's also this button over here on the right. You can learn more about that later on, but I just wanted you to know that was an option. You as a team manager would not have to manage, exchanging shifts and things like that. So the last thing I want to show you now that we've looked at our services and our escalation policies and our schedules is, of course, our users. What do we do with our individual user profiles? How do we get notified? So if Hermione here is on call and she is assigned an incident, how does she find out about it? Okay, so now that we've looked at our services, we've looked at escalation policies, we've looked at schedules. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about the users. Where do we fall into this? How do we, as responders, as individual users in PagerDuty, how do we interact with this information, this data? So I wanted to talk about how we receive notifications in particular. And with that, you have the ability to receive 4 different types of notifications within the PagerDuty platform. You can receive a phone call. You'll get a short description of what the problem is. You'll have the ability to then acknowledge the incident, resolve the incident, or escalate the incident right there from the phone call itself. You also have SMS available to you. So you can receive that SMS. You'll again be able to respond to it right there in the text message itself. Just note that those codes do change. Phone call codes do not change, SMS codes do change. And then push notifications. Download that PagerDuty mobile app, log into the same account, and you'll have the ability to set up push notifications on your phone. And lastly, email. Email is a static notification type, so just note that you cannot directly respond to an incident. This is something that is just informational. You'll see how we use that with a low urgency incident as an example. Okay, so I'm going to navigate to my profile page. I'm going to hover over my picture in the top right-hand corner. You might see the silhouette of a person. Click on My Profile from that dropdown, and it's going to take you to your Contact Information tab. You can see a lot of different fields here that I've already filled out. You can click on this little edit icon on the far right if you need to update any of those. Things like your title. I've added PDU, my team name, to my name, just so that it's really easy and clear across the account which team I'm a part of. My time zone's very important. And then we get to our contact information. Now, we have different types of contact information, as I showed you in that previous slide: phone numbers, SMS numbers, email addresses, and you have that mobile app that you can enable. So it's very easy to add a new contact method, put the country code in, and then type in that phone number. And you can select what type of phone number that is to help you categorize it, and then hit save. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that one, though. You can see I have a couple examples there. SMS numbers, similarly, you add that. Your email address, you can add right here. This is which email address you want to be notified on or via when it comes to these incidents. And then this mobile app section is going to populate once you have downloaded the PagerDuty mobile app. I always recommend using this test button over here on the far right of the field so that you can make sure that you typed everything in correctly too. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about today are these notification rules. So I mentioned earlier when we were setting up our services that you have high urgency and low urgency incidents. And the service is going to determine which notification type is going to be used. So as you can imagine, for high urgency incidents, we want them to be noisy. We want them to be attention grabbing. So each individual user gets to decide how and where they would want to be contacted. What does it mean to be high urgency to them? So for me, I've decided that I want to receive a phone call immediately after the incident is assigned to me. Let me hit that edit button so you can see how I did that. So 0 minutes after the incident is assigned to me, then I get to choose from the drop-down menu where I want to be contacted. I said my mobile device, that's the best thing. If I answer that phone call, it stops all notification. If I answer the phone call and acknowledge the incident, it stops the notifications, it stops the escalation process as well. But if for some reason I don't answer that first phone call, I'm busy, maybe I have do not disturb on, I'm going to get a text message 1 minute later, 1 minute after the incident is assigned to me. If I don't acknowledge that incident or resolve that incident, it's then going to call me again 1 minute later or 2 minutes after the incident was assigned to me. So you can see that these rules are scattered. They're what we call a waterfall effect. So every 1 to 3 minutes, I'm going to get a different notification type until we hit that escalation policy rule. So in this case, I think I said 8 minutes for that escalation policy we just created. And so after 8 minutes, instead of continuing on with my notification rules, it's going to go to the second level of the escalation policy, go to the backup person. So think about how noisy you want these rules to be. Think about high urgency incidents being those critical incidents. That's going to be different from your low urgency incidents, which you can also set up here in the notification rules. And that's going to get you started. That's going to allow you to receive notifications when an incident is assigned to you in PagerDuty. So Thank you so much for your time and attention here. I wanted to just leave you with one action item, and that is to get your foundational practitioner certification. This is going to allow you to both test your knowledge, make sure that you really do understand the fundamental pieces of the PagerDuty platform. And of course, then you can show it off to all of your friends and family, your employers, everyone, your team members to say, look, I know what is going on with this platform. I know what some of the best practices are, and I can really be depended on to be an expert in this tool. So if you're interested in taking that foundational certification, you have the ability to either attend one of our upcoming Summit live virtual PDU trainings. Those are 3-hour long sessions. We'll go through all the content you need to go through in order to take this exam, be prepared for that exam. Or you can take the foundational level courses in the on-demand modules, which you can find at university.pagerduty.com. Thank you so much.